Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today I have Avyakt with us. So in my entire immune journey or career, he has been the one he has been the one with whom I have always looked up to whenever it comes down to chairing. We have chaired multiple conferences and specifically when it comes down to the Indian committee. So hi Avyakt bhai, how things are going? How are you doing?
Yeah, hello Sankalp. Thank you so much for such a warm introduction. Yeah, I have done quite a few conferences, and I mean, similar to, your situation right now, like we are not kind of regulars anymore, but yeah, from time to time, if we get an opportunity, I think that appeals to us, we turn up for it.
Absolutely. So, Avid today the topic of discussion is more specific to the Indian committees and the scenarios related to that, right? Because there are a lot of people who are willing to participate in Indian committees, and they don't have a proper guidance to what exactly it is, how exactly it is, right? So the first thing first is that what exactly are Indian committees, and what are the different types that you might have encountered in your entire Indian journey?
Basically, there are, two types of Indian committees. Like one is a Lok Sabha or a Rajya Sabha or any house of parliament or any legislative assembly of any state as such. They usually have a similar structure based rules of procedure. Whether it's Lok Sabha, whether it's Rajya Sabha, whether it's Odisha Legislative Assembly or any legislative assembly, West Bengal Legislative Assembly, any Vidhan Sabha, they all have a same rules of procedure based structure. The other kind
Mm-hmm.
is a more informal structure that usually exists in AIPPM, which is All India Political Parties Meet, or there are cases of All India Stakeholders Meet also taking place. So these are sort of slightly more informal, which do not have uh, a well laid out ROP as well. I mean, similar to I mean Lok Sabha, so they are slightly different. So again, like here in Odisha circuit, I have mostly done my conferences in Odisha circuit. So there are a limited number of Indian committees happening. It's usually restricted to Lok Sabha or else AIPPM. But I mean, outside I've come across a lot of other conferences. I mean, a lot of other states wherein they have a variety of let's say committees.
Mm-hmm.
But here, I think it's usually these few that have been taking place over the past few years.
Yeah. So, as you told that there might be like different variety of legislative assemblies or that kind of thing, right? But I believe that the approach towards like the approach towards representing a particular portfolio would be the same for these kind of, or is there any kind of difference between between the
So,
committees?
so I think personally, what I feel is when you go to a Lok Sabha or a Rajya Sabha or a legislative assembly, so what usually happens is very strictly you have to stick to, what your portfolio recommends or suggests. Like if you're representing someone from the BJP or from the Indian National Congress for that matter, you have to stick to what that particular person does. You cannot be let's say Narendra Modi and appreciate what the Congress has done over the past few years. So in Lok Sabha, there is a limited scope for this. But what I
Mm-hmm.
have seen, because there is a very limited scope for this. But what I've seen, the slight difference that exists in AIPPM or All India Stakeholders Meet, what I've seen from, chairs who have come in from outside as well, from
Mm-hmm.
the Delhi circuit, from other circuits, those who have come in, there's a slightly better, higher scope or a leeway for, even when you're representing a Congress portfolio, you may
Mm-hmm.
appreciate some, policy that has been brought forward by the uh, other party. This could
Mm-hmm.
happen in All India Stakeholders Meet, All India Political Parties Meet. Although again the difference is very minimal, but there is a leeway. Ki you can do
Yeah.
this and don't get debarred for it, or like you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
markings for it, or whatever
Uh-huh.
the scenario is. Because
Uh-huh.
it's a informal meet that is invited by the ruling party or the
Ruling
BJP
party.
to get or opinions of all the individuals
Mm-hmm.
involved there. So in that scenario, there is a chance that these people might be more honest than they are in a Lok Sabha when they know it's being put on record and it's going
Okay.
to be watched by everybody. However, AIPPM
Mm,
meets are not usually, recorded meets that are put forward to for the general public to watch.
Got it, got it. So, let's say if a first timer, like somebody who has not done any sort of MUNs, right, and he or she is interested towards going to the first party, the first, uh, I would say the committee, right? Or to what would you suggest? Like, first of all, what kind of portfolio that you would suggest, like be it from the ruling party or the opposition? Which one would you prefer as a professional delegate kind of thing? And what kind of committee also?
I mean, with respect to what your question was, I mean, it's the same as we do in any UN committee. Like, we try to find a portfolio that's,
Mm.
that's neutral and that's not, so well known. For example,
Mm-hmm.
for a long portion of time, like you could pick up BJD if
Mm-hmm.
it was in Lok Sabhas as well. You could pick up, any political portfolio from BJD because it used to
Mm-hmm.
support the national government on some issues and oppose them on certain other issues. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what we do in UN is when we take up unknown countries like, let's say, Kiribati or Tuvalu. That's the same idea
Yeah, yeah.
that we take up people who everyone does not know about much. So
Know about.
even if we say something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
they'll not be able
Mm-hmm.
to know okay, it's not in line with our portfolio policy or in line with our party policy. So that is what we usually. But then again, if it comes
Mm-hmm.
to choosing between two specific parties, which is the ruling party and the opposition party, I think personally opposition party is always easier because the ruling party is always in power and it's easier to
Mm-hmm.
criticize than to build constructively on something. I mean, this is true
Mm-hmm.
for everything. It's easier to bring down
Yeah.
something than to work constructively towards it. So
Yeah, like pointing
so
out, blaming people. I
huh.
mean, that's easier than defense kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
So,
Also, because the
yeah.
ruling party in our case has been there for more than 10 years. So there's not
Uh,
much to blame the Congress for. I mean, although the BJP still does it for the past 40 years or going back to Nehru era, but it's more difficult to do that because, they haven't
hmm,
been here for 10 years. So there's no point criticizing them for not being in power. And they're not in power in multiple other states as well. There are either
exactly.
regional parties or BJP leading in most states.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
from that way, if you see, it's easier to do it with a, opposition
Opposition
portfolio.
party in a portfolio, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Avyakt, I have seen that like a lot of delegates comes up and they have very common doubt. The common doubt is that how they can prepare a speech if they are representing like in Indian committees you represent a person, right? As a portfolio you represent a person, right? And the major doubt that comes up is that key whether they should like they should align with the thought of the portfolio that they are representing, or they can include something from their personal opinions, or like something like that, or the ideology should be the same, or they need to like they can differ, or like maneuver through it. So how would you tackle this particular kind of thing?
So again, I think this is, there's no black and white in this. This is a very gray area. Like, it depends on the specific executive board whether they like it or not. But I think
Mm-hmm.
usually what you can do, as I said, previously as well, if it's not such a well-known person, then you have a chance. Then you have a scope key. You can add in your
Okay.
personal opinion. Matlab,
Mm-hmm.
lekin if it's, let's say, Narendra Modi, if it's, let's say, Amit
Uh,
Shah, if it's Rahul Gandhi, there's a lot lesser scope to add in your personal opinion. Although you can still
uh,
do it, but
uh,
it will be visible. Let's say if you are a very hardcore BJP leader and
uh,
you you completely change your stance on the day
mm-hmm.
of the event. That will reflect that won't reflect so well. Let's say you're someone like Subramaniam Swamy. So
Mm-hmm.
and you can't go in and I mean start changing your entire ideology on that day of the conference. So there's a
Exactly.
bit of leeway, but
uh,
again, if you usually want to put in your personal opinion, it's always
mm,
better to take to become someone who's either not so well known or who
uh,
don't have a history of giving political statements or opinion in the general media. Like, they don't have a lot of PR.
mm,
Whoever doesn't have a lot of PR,
mm,
you can pick that person. like let's say ex chief
Nice.
justices or ex lawyers who have become
Yeah.
politicians. So you can pick those
Yeah.
people who are not very involved in making statements to the media. So you won't
Yeah. Yeah.
find a
Yeah.
history of what they have said previously. So that would be easier
Um,
to put in
Yeah,
your
yeah, and I
personal
think
opinion.
that's a better strategy to adapt also, right? Like in terms of when if you're confused, and I mean that's a smart play that you do, right? If like a portfolio like Narendra Modi, who's very well known, like everything he does comes out in public, and anybody can just go back and trace back and like point it out in the committee itself. But again, with a smaller known or lesser known portfolio, you still have the scope of putting out your opinions in the whole scenario, right? So that's I think it's a better approach as well as especially for a person who is like who has done a couple of conferences here and there, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Because anything Narendra Modi has said, they will ask questions based on that. If you say anything
yeah,
contradictory, I mean, because
mm,
out of 30 people, so what
mm,
happens in UN is we usually don't come across these statements. Okay,
mm,
although
mm,
now, I mean, we do. I mean, every day there's a new newspaper headline with respect to what Trump has said, but this
mm,
does not involve the other countries. I mean, Africa. We don't know what African countries are saying on this. Okay,
exactly,
we don't
yeah,
know
yeah,
what the Pacific nations are saying on this. However, what
mm,
happens when you do an Indian committee is every day you'll come across a newspaper headline. Amit Shah said this today, Narendra Modi has said this today. So out of those 30, 40 people in the committee, at least one of them will remember that this is
mm,
something contradictory to what the Prime
yeah,
Minister said earlier. So you'll be caught
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, coming down to let's say rules of procedures, right? So
Yeah.
let's first go ahead with the ROPs of Lok Sabha, followed by the AIPPM, right? So let's just tell us about the ROPs followed in Lok Sabha.
So, I mean, ideally, what happens in Lok Sabha, again, I'll try to keep it as close to what happens in the actual Lok Sabha. But, I mean, depending upon executive board member to executive board member, this differs a lot.
Yeah.
So, ideally, there are three things that should happen in the Lok Sabha. So, one is it starts with a question hour. Okay, that is one.
Hmm.
Then, second up, there's a 0 hour. Then we have a lunch from 1 to 2, and that is followed by legislative business for the House, which is taking up bills and discussing bills. Now, what
Okay.
happens usually in committees is the first two usually do happen, question hour or 0 hour, even if not in that order, but it does happen. But a lot of people, I mean, as we have come across in Indian committees as well, we don't
Hmm.
always go for documentation. We don't always take up bills
Yeah.
for discussion. This was there. I mean, when I started doing conferences, that there used to be this event Kit Convoy that was
Okay.
organized by some specific department. So they when we started, we used to take up specific bills for discussion.
Okay.
It restricted the discussion to a particular agenda item. I mean,
Okay.
to a very short topic. Let's say because a bill
Hmm.
is very specific. Let's say if we take up the Citizenship Amendment Act
Uh-huh.
or the Citizenship Amendment Bill now, so it becomes
Yeah.
very specific. It's difficult to it's difficult for 30 different people to speak on it because there are two sides and you have to pick one side. Either you are
Take
in
one
favor of it
exactly.
or you're opposing it. So
Hmm.
I mean, of course, I understand that is true for all agendas as well, but there's a larger scope to argue, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that is what happens. Usually, that used to happen, but now it's not so common for us to take up legislative business. So we have replaced
Hmm.
that with motions. We usually take up
Hmm.
motions. Now, the names of these motions might vary again because there's no
Hmm.
actual provision in the Lok Sabha to take up a motion for discussion or what we call a I mean, how we have copied the idea from a moderated caucus in UN committees. There's usually no such motion in the actual parliament, but we have picked up from certain things. There are motions, but they are restricted to, let's say, there are different types of motions. Let's say
Hmm.
adjournment motion, calling attention
Hmm.
motion. Now we'll go to all
Hmm.
this, but obviously the first two important things that happen is a question hour and a 0 hour. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
in the question hour, there are usually three types of questions that we have. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, this is the actual Lok Sabha, but I mean, in a simulation, we follow two types of questions. I hope
Okay.
that's not
Okay.
too confusing, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
one is one is questions you ask on the floor of the house. You
Uh-huh.
get answered verbally on the floor of the house, so it's verbal. You ask the
Okay.
questions verbally, you get the answers verbally. They are known
Uh-huh.
as starred questions. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
and the other type is unstarred questions, where you
Mm-hmm.
write it via chit and you get the answer via chit as well. It's in
Okay.
written. So this is the major
Uh,
difference between starred and unstarred. Now,
Okay.
however, in the actual Lok Sabha, the issue is that these questions are sent 15 days before, because the
Okay.
members of parliament actually have to, gather information on that particular question and present it. So that data
Okay.
has to be accurate. You can't just
Hmm.
make it up at that point of time. So
Hmm.
both, start questions are sent in at least 15 days before, a
Before.
parliament session.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, but in conferences, what usually happens is we take it on the day of the conference. It's not even like one day before or 2 days before. So there's another
Hmm.
provision which the Parliament follows. It's called a short notice question.
Okay.
So short notice questions are usually ones which are sent at a shorter notice than starred or unstarred questions. But again, in the
Okay.
actual Parliament, they have a 10-day limit, as far as I remember. Okay.
Okay.
So what happens is when we do simulations, so there's no
Uh,
need for us to bring in short notice questions,
okay.
because it also has a 10-day limit. So why break it up?
Uh,
We can directly include just start and unstart, because short notice will
uh,
also be answered in two of the ways that there are. Okay, either
okay.
verbally
Okay.
or so it's better to
Mm-hmm.
keep it restricted to verbal and verbal or oral and written answers. So start and
Mm-hmm.
unstart. These are the two kinds of questions we have.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem, however, that exists in Indian committees is, as per the actual ROP, what usually happens is only the opposition can ask questions, which is what I was, telling you why it's easier to be opposition party member. I mean, a minister or a part of the treasury bench, they can't ask each other questions. Let's say you are,
Questions.
the road highway minister and I'm a fruit processing minister or whatever. We don't ask each
Mm.
other questions. So if we take up
Acha.
important portfolios, what
Uh-huh.
happens
Okay.
is we lose out on some sort of marks, because
Uh,
what happens is the opposition does not ask questions to, let's say, a Jal Shakti minister or a food
uh,
processing minister. They will ask all
uh,
their questions to the home minister or the prime minister.
got it.
So there's no way of
Yeah.
ensuring that if you are a government member that you'll get one question addressed to you.
And,
So again, this differs, and I have done it across committees as well. Usually,
hmm.
sometimes if there are a very large number of government members, and what usually
Mm-hmm.
also happens is, since the BJP is in power, I don't know what ideology there is among kids, but government members are more. So there are 20 government members and 10 opposition members. Now, what happens is
Mm.
the 10 opposition members, even if they ask, a question each to every member, there are still 10 government
Mm-hmm.
members who are left out.
Left out with it.
So in
Exactly. Yeah.
So to balance that out again, it's a headache marking wise. You'll have to, because they
Uh,
are ready to, answer. They are ready to ask questions. But there's
uh,
no point of them asking questions to the side of the opposition, because they are
yeah.
not in power. What
Power.
answers do you expect from them? So this
Mm.
is, the question or
So,
conundrum as such from the, view of an executive board member. So it's always easier
yeah.
to be an opposition member.
Uh, yeah. So moving on to the ROPs of AIPPM, let's say, are there any major differences, or is it very similar to Lok Sabha?
Yeah,
Or
that is completely different.
okay.
That is
Okay.
completely different in the sense that there, again, as I said previously as well, there is no laid down procedure as such. Lok Sabha
Hmm.
or Rajya Sabha, they have a laid down rule book, and we
Mm-hmm.
follow it. There's a chance to follow it, so it's very formal. But in
Mm-hmm.
AIPPM, it's very different. So there's no rule book, there's no specific. So we have usually based it on the UNA USA ROP format that we follow. Like most of the executive board members I have met or I've seen, they've based it
Okay.
on that structure. So AIPPM is a lot easier to understand. So there are two kinds of
Mm.
sessions. One is a public session, and the other is a private session. Now the
Okay.
only difference is that a public session is covered by the media. So
Oh.
or the international press that we have in simulations, or the
Yeah.
national
Yeah.
press that we have, and
Yeah.
the private sessions are not covered by the international
Media.
press or the national press. So again, in public session, there are two types of sessions. One is a public moderated session, and the other is a public unmoderated session. Now, a
Mm-hmm.
public moderated session is similar to,
The
when
moderated
we have a
caucus of,
huh.
yeah. Okay. Okay.
So, and a public unmoderated session is similar to, let's say, a 0 hour type thing in Lok Sabha. So
Okay.
there's no similar corollary in a UN committee, but a 0 hour,
Mm-hmm.
which I also previously talked about. So what
Yeah.
happens is the EB does not moderate as much.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one. Either the moderators are picked up from the side of the government,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
has again been borrowed. Everything has been borrowed from somewhere or the other. So it has been borrowed from UN for I mean, the idea that there can be one
Yeah.
moderator who would regulate the side
Regulate the whole
that
scenario. Yeah.
that their party members are speaking from. So that is a public
Mm.
unmoderated session which is covered by the media. Now
Uh-huh.
again, the private sessions are also of these two types. There is a private moderated
Mm.
session. There is a private unmoderated session. And
Unmoderated.
the difference here is that it's not covered by the media. So in a
Uh-huh.
private moderated session. However, in a private unmoderated session, this is like the unmods that we have for lobbying
Mm-hmm.
around, for talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the
Mm-hmm.
idea. Now this might differ slightly, but this is the general idea.
This
Public
is
session,
the
private session, and both have moderated and unmod. So this is much easier to understand. But Lok
uh-huh.
Sabhas have a lot of technicalities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, let's say coming down to the chairing aspect of a committee, right? And you move into any MUN, right? And the most, I would say, happening committee or the most chaotic committee that that looks like from the outside is any Indian committee that you come across, right? Like people are arguing like crazy, right? So what are the challenges as an executive board member that you might have come across in order to like let's say judge these delegates, and give appropriate marks to them? What are the criterias first of all, and how do you tackle such a scenario where like people are like this close to like physically fight with each other, right?
Yeah.
So
So
so how do you
yeah.
tackle that?
Yeah, so I think criteria are again more or less the same. Like, I mean, how you debate. I mean, what is your content
Hmm.
based on how many I mean, again, how many speeches or the opportunities that you get to speak. What is the content of your chits? Whether you're
Hmm.
lobbying around or not. Then, if you are contributing to the final documentation that we make. Now, challenges obviously it's a lot difficult than UN committees. UN committees are a
Yeah.
lot smoother to mark upon because there's not so much disruption. So one of the
Hmm.
challenges, as I said in the questionnaire, is that there are government members who want to answer questions, but
Hmm.
if someone is not asking a question to them, now it's
Hmm.
problematic to somehow include them in the conversation. So sometimes what happens is even after let's say the prime minister or the home minister answering a question, we allow
Hmm.
another member or another minister to answer a question. However, this is usually not the scenario. Now again,
Hmm.
what happens is the questionnaire has a 20 question limit. In the actual Lok
Hmm.
Sabha, there's a 20 question limit. So it gets completed within an hour. So
Hmm.
you also have to stick by that 20 question limit. So even if you
Hmm.
allow opposition members to ask multiple questions, that won't
Hmm.
solve the issue. Because now what
Hmm.
happens is opposition members will get two questions each, while each member will get one question each. Now again, you have to
Hmm.
take an average of the marks of the questions that the opposition members have asked. Now, but again, that does not help because not every opposition members wants to ask a question once they know it's an average because they have come up with
Hmm.
one good question. Now their second question might not be as good. So
That great,
there are
yeah.
multiple considerations in that scenario. Similarly, in the
Hmm.
zero hour, the contention as you talked about is disruption. Zero hour, what
Hmm.
happens is people shout a lot, people scream a lot. I mean, shout in the sense that multiple people are speaking at one time. I
At
mean,
the
I
same
don't want
time,
to
yeah,
misguide. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah. No, I
multiple
understand. Yeah.
yeah, so multiple people are speaking at the same time. So it's very difficult to understand while four people are speaking to know what each
Hmm.
of them is speaking about or while each
Hmm.
of them is speaking. So at times there's this issue that you're not able to hear all of them, and you try to make them understand to a certain point that either I mean maximum you can hear to two people speaking at one time. Beyond that, it's
Hmm.
very difficult
Hmm.
for I mean our ears to take note
Yeah,
of what everyone is
exactly.
speaking about.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
I mean that is one of the issues that I mean we have come across. I
Uh-huh.
mean these are the most common issues. Apart from
Hmm.
that, motions and all. Again, the I mean what happens in UN committees is there are nations, so they have a freedom or a liberty to choose. I mean, vote for one mod or vote for not vote for one mod. But what
Hmm.
happens in Lok Sabha, the third common problem that I talked about is if there are 20 government members and
Hmm.
a minister is raising a motion, ideally
Hmm.
they have to vote for that motion. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it takes out the scope of, let's say, opposition members doing something constructive because none of their motions will pass because none of the
Yeah.
government members will support them. So,
Yes,
either way,
yes.
like here it happens so that the government are more in number, but even if the
Uh-huh.
opposition are more in number, which has also happened at
Hmm.
some conferences, so it will be very
Hmm.
difficult for the government to pass up motions. So,
Hmm.
when they frame up motions which are, framed in such a way, that
Mm-hmm.
whatever no matter what you speak, okay, it will be
Mm-hmm.
detrimental to your portfolio or your
Portfolio.
ideology because the topic
Yeah.
is framed in such a manner.
Uh-huh. Got it.
So I
Yeah.
think these are the most common issues that we face.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of delegates have a very common doubt, or I would say the majority reason that they choose an Indian committee, right, is because it allows I mean, there is no language barrier of, like speaking only in English, right? So they're like, there are multiple ways in which there are multiple, I would say, uh, ways through which, delegate can choose their own language as well. So, do you think that it's a better or a constructive step as compared to the UN committees, or is it a limitation?
It's constructive, but then again it's constructive because we I have personally come up in Odisha where we
Mm.
had an option to, let's say, study Hindi for a major part of our I mean school curriculum until class
Mm-hmm.
8. We I mean after class 8 we had to choose only one, but until that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because of that framework, and that is the same for most, I mean, school students here. So since we had that opportunity, now it's constructive here because everyone can
Mm-hmm.
speak in Hindi, but also because we will be able to understand what they're speaking. Now
Exactly.
again, if this had been a case, now the, I mean, the most contentious political issue that is happening right now, if there had been a case there where there had been no Hindi, it
Uh,
wouldn't have been as constructive because
uh-huh.
even if there are people who are willing to speak in Hindi, the rest of the most of the committee would not be able to understand it.
Understand it. Yeah.
So, but right now I think it's more constructive because I mean, as I said, you come across issues, you can put them in
Mm-hmm.
your own words, in whichever
Mm-hmm.
language you're comfortable in. And ideally, in the Lok Sabha, there's also liberty, although English and Hindi are, the languages that we usually prefer. There's also an opportunity to speak in regional languages as long as they're translators.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I mean, very recently, last year, I think we had a issue of I mean, instance of a Odisha Legislative Assembly coming up as well. So
Okay.
that was also very interesting because I mean, there people had an opportunity to speak in Odia completely, and the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
participants who came into the committee came in with the expectations that the debate will be in Odia. So they have to be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, have to have a good idea about speaking or conversing in Odia to understand. It was very
Uh,
difficult for me, although I have, as I said, I have also studied. I mean, I chose Odia from standard 8 to standard 10. It was very
uh-huh.
difficult for me because we have, come up, I mean, we have stuck to this mindset wherein once we enter the committee, we start speaking in English or Hindi.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
even though, I mean, outside committee, I'm a very
Mm.
fluent Odia speaker as such, but it's very difficult to bring that out within the committee. So that's a
Yeah.
different
I
kind of
understand.
yeah,
Yeah,
environment.
exactly. So, even like I have only done once or twice in the Indian committee, right? And when I saw people like, like literally debating in Hindi, right? So it became a challenge for me as well. Like, again, it's the same case. I'm a very fluent Hindi speaker, full on, right? But in the committee, like forming arguments and, constructive arguments and all that, that becomes a challenge. So, but I think Indian committees allow you to like be more comfortable in whatever you are speaking, like your languages and all that, right? So I think it's overall a constructive, I would say, step towards the whole scenario, right?
Yeah, because the thing is that, I mean, your or mine English, I mean, might be average or above average, but everyone does not have that same level
Yeah.
of, let's say, I mean, interest in English, let's say in
Mm-hmm.
English speaking. So
Mm-hmm.
they might be better or fluent speakers in Hindi. I mean, like that, because when we say that we are very fluent speakers in regional languages as well, the thing is that, I mean, the problem that arises when speaking inside the company, we do not, as you said, we do not know a lot of constructive words. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not
yeah.
saying that the language that we speak outside is very cheap. That's not what I'm
No, no,
suggesting,
no, 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 no.
but I mean, there are a
Yeah.
lot of words whose translations you do not know. I mean,
Do not know
and I
exactly.
mean, so that's I mean, so it's a learning opportunity from that idea as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not pick up on
Mm-hmm.
something that a delegate has spoken, I mean, I
Yeah.
personally, I see no harm in asking the delegate what is this particular thing that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And I think that adds on
So
to the responsibility of an executive board as well, right? So yeah. So a bit, like as I said, that the whole scenario of a Lok Sabha is very kind of disruptive in nature, right? And I mean, in your career as well as in my MUN career, we have seen a lot of delegates who are, like quite underconfident when it comes to their first conference, or like, and that too, especially a Lok Sabha or any sort of Indian committee, right? So, first of all, how would an underconfident delegate who finds it difficult to speak up in the committee where like everybody is like very disruptive in nature, how he or she can come up to that particular degree, right? And how can an executive board help them out in certain ways?
So, I mean, personally, I think it's the first step forward that you have to take is you have to attend one of these committees to see, how it usually happens. Because opposite to what happens in UN committees, in Indian committees, even if while you're making normal speeches, not just in the
Hmm.
question hour or in the 0 hour, people do interrupt. People do interrupt.
Hmm.
People do make snide remarks or comments, and you will be interrupted. So if you are not, if you're not that confident while speaking, if you lose out on your flow in the middle of a speech, it will happen so that people will interrupt you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
have to take up that step forward, wherein you, at the end of the day, you have to, it's not that I'm saying that Indian companies are better or they are tougher, but your performance wise, you'll have to, one, you need to have a high pitch
Hmm.
so that it's audible to the rest of the committee. Okay.
Absolutely.
Two,
Yes.
as executive boards, what we can recommend is try to, keep the sentences or the wordings as short and to the point as possible.
Hmm.
Because if you have very long sentences, like we come across political analysts who use up very long sentences. So, but this, that will be difficult in a committee to understand for a larger number of people. So if it's short to the point, it will be easier for you to stick to your point as well at the
Hmm.
at a, so basically you have to perform out of your skins to be heard in an
Hmm.
Indian committee in certain sessions. A lot of these
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
actually miss out on Indian companies because they're not able to you know be argumentative in
Absolutely.
a very confrontational sense,
Hmm.
which
Hmm. Hmm.
UN companies do not ask for.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's the challenge that even I faced, like after attending one or two Indian committees, right? That the kind of environment that a UN committee provides, which is kind of a little bit more comfortable for a delegate,
it's a safe
to start with.
environment.
Yeah, it's a safe environment, right? So it's not as brutal as what we see in the Indian committees, right? And as you said, that you have to be like very upfronted, and you will be interrupted in a lot of senses, and you need to be controlled in that way, right? And I think that's very important. Like, if you like, I've also seen that in multiple scenarios where a delegate who has started out with Indian committees and then moved on to UN committees has seen like a better chances of like winning and getting awards as compared to the reverse of the order, right? So that difference is clearly visible in the different kind of delegates that you and I have come across. So moving on, Avyakt, are there any like pieces of advices that you would give to the delegate who is just starting out, and based on your experiences, be it in terms of a delegate who is starting out, or be it in terms of the executive board side of it?
I think personally, this is the one thing that I say across conferences. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But the general advice that I would recommend is, it's a good initiative. At the end of the day, it's a good extracurricular or co-curricular activity, and you get to learn a lot. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but as what from what your experience also has been, from what everyone's experiences has been, beyond a certain tipping point, let's say 30-35 conferences, you don't learn. I mean, I mean, let's say, something very new that you have never come
Mm-hmm.
across. This is not a
Mm-hmm.
scenario that come across is, the tipping point may be different for everyone beyond 35, 40, 50, whatever. Beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
you don't learn everything new at, every single conference. So, I just say
Exactly.
that don't make MUNs your, I mean, way of life or whatever. It's not that you, it should not be an addictive, in a sense that I have to do one MUN this month, I have to do I have to do one conference every week.
Yes.
It should not be your, let's say, source of in terms of, let's say, money, or in terms of validation, whatever, either way.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
you should look at it as a co-curricular activity. Of course, there's a lot to learn. There's a, you'll form, you'll come across, you'll make good friends across MUNs as well. Okay, so everyone may not be, good, but what I'm saying is it depends upon your personality as well. So you might
Mm-hmm.
come across a lot of people you'll be in touch with for a longer period, a longer part of your life. So all that is good. But at the end of the day, and I think one other issue is, I mean, this ideology that has come up with social media usually is that system hila denge. So, so this, I mean, again, so
I can understand, like where this might be coming
no,
from.
this is not, this is not. I mean, this is not targeted or anything. I'm
No, no,
saying this on a
I
very,
understand this
yeah,
whole social media scenario, and like the kind of I would say the reels that are being posted. I mean,
yeah,
people are taking it way more seriously than it should be taken, right? And way more personally, I would say. Like, I have come across a couple of reels here and there, where they're like again the same thing, like system hila
yeah.
denge, or
No, I mean, yeah, this ideology that, I mean, there is, since I mean, there is merit that we should be the
uh,
only ones who should be carrying it forward. But I mean,
uh,
it's really time to self introspect. If, I mean, it's worth that 3 or 5K, whatever you're getting as an executive board member at most
mm-hmm,
conferences across Odisha for 1 or 2 days. If it's really
mm-hmm.
worth the time and effort to, make defamatory posts against individuals to ensure that they are not chairing, to, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
got it.
what part of it I should bring up or not bring up, but
No,
I
no,
mean, there
yeah,
are individuals who have been dragged to stations for this, and all of this is, I mean, absolutely unnecessary for an event. I mean, at
exactly.
the end of the day, if you look at it, it's like a private company. It's a private event. If I do not
Yes.
like you as a person, I'll not invite
Uh,
you as a I'll not allow you to come to my conference as a delegate or as executive board member or as an organizing committee. And I feel there's
mm-hmm,
nothing wrong with that. If I don't want to, uh, work with you as a person, if I can't
mm-hmm,
stand your presence, then
mm-hmm.
there's no, it's not mandatory to accept
Mandatory,
your
yeah.
merit and allow you in whatever conference I'm organizing, because at the end of the day it's a
Mm.
private infrastructure, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So what we are saying is there should be, I mean, again, this is what I mean, similar to what the government says, that there should be reservation, everyone should be allowed. So this
Uh,
is not how MUNs work, because it's a student led initiative. And
Initiative, yeah.
if, yeah, if you do not like someone, there's no point of dragging, I mean, that story further. Just stay away,
Mm-hmm.
just move on. There, as I said, there are conferences every other week. If you do
Yeah,
not attend this
exactly.
one conference, there's one conference going on right now as we are speaking. You don't attend that conferences, there's no, I mean, hurry in that, or you're not missing
Uh,
out on anything significant, because you have
exactly.
attended that conference multiple number of times. I have done that conference multiple number of times. And it's not that if we are not attending conference, that we dislike the people involved or we
Exactly,
don't
yeah.
appreciate them. We want it to go well as well.
Mm-hmm. That's what like I and a couple of my close friends in the circuit, they have it key. There's a threshold that you reach, right? Like that's how I operate, right? Like last year, after doing around again 40-45 conferences here and there, I have reached that threshold now कि मतलब कोई आता है कोई आती है कॉन्फ्रेंस तो मैं कर लेता हूँ या फिर like it's not, I'm not very actively involved into all of this, right? एंड आई थिंक दैट्स द सेम केस विद यू एज वेल कि मतलब ठीक है, मतलब आ रहा है तो ठीक है, नहीं आ रहा है तो ठीक है, राइट? सो दैट्स हाउ यू शुड आल्सो बी लाइक the people who are listening might be, they should also approach it कि हाँ चलो 1-2 साल 3 साल 4 साल का at max, you have that period where you are like growing in that circuit, and like growth in the circuit actually gives you all that I would say the rush, and like you start out as a delegate, you like start winning, and then you chair, and then like you're recognized and all that, but stretching it to a degree where like even neither you are comfortable nor I am comfortable, so that's a problem, right? And I have said that in one or the other video as well, like like don't make life out of MUNs, right? Like don't consider it as a only thing that you can come across with, right? So I think that's a great advice actually to actually listen, follow up with it, right? So thanks Avyakt, yeah, for all of this, and it was lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. I had a wonderful time as well. I mean, the general idea, just to, wrap up and conclude with it. I mean, what you said, if you have done 40, 50 conferences,
Hmm.
one day, if you go to a 41st or 51st conference, suddenly you will not change as a person. What you have done
Hmm.
across those 40, 50 conferences, people may like you, people may not like you, but you won't change as a person. So, whenever, there are these scenarios, ki, Sankalp, tu Indian क्यों नहीं करता है? why don't I delegate enough? So I mean, these are questions that don't bother us after a certain point, because I delegated when I
Exactly.
had to delegate, and I have had my fair share of experiences.
Exactly.
I
And you
don't
know
have
what?
to.
Like, just
Yeah,
adding on to it, the people who are, like who raise these kind of questions, right? It's been only 6 months for them since you are here in circuit, right?
yeah,
And since like when we started out as delegating, that was like 5 years back, bro. Like, what are you
yeah.
talking, right? So that's the thing that comes out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Please,
So
please
I mean,
continue.
for me, though, even it was further back. Like, I mean, we are talking about like the match that we have tomorrow. So, I mean, the players
Yeah.
go out on the field. They don't go out to impress anybody. It's
Exactly.
we go out for ourselves. Okay. So I mean, we don't have a point to prove to anyone, and I mean that should be the ideology that every young kid should go out with. They go out there to see what their level of achievement can be, what they can do for themselves, and how it helps them
Absolutely.
as an individual to grow. What you specifically said, it's not to
Hmm.
prove out that, see, I'm better than you, or I mean compare yourself to somebody else. These kinds of things
Hmm.
should not happen, but it usually happens. I think it has happened to me as well when I was a teenager. But I mean,
Hmm.
this is the advice that you can give in hindsight, that these are the things you should avoid.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much, Avyakt. Thank you so much for being there. Right. Just a second.